History often remembers the generals who commanded armies in the field, and the presidents who delivered speeches that defined eras. Far less visible, but no less powerful, are the figures who shaped outcomes from behind desks, maps, and conference tables. Among them stands George C. Marshall, a man whose influence spanned battlefields, diplomacy, and the rebuilding of an entire continent. Marshall never sought celebrity. He rarely raised his voice, avoided dramatic flair, and resisted political maneuvering. Yet his fingerprints are everywhere across the 20th century's most decisive moments. From organizing the largest military force in American history to reshaping post-war Europe, Marshall's legacy is one of discipline, restraint, and extraordinary impact. Early foundations of leadership. Born in 1880 in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, George Catlett Marshall came of age during a period when the United States was redefining its place on the global stage. His family's fortunes fluctuated, and his early academic performance was unremarkable. What set Marshall apart was not brilliance in the classroom, but an unwavering commitment to self-improvement and leadership. At the Virginia Military Institute, he steadily rose through the ranks, ultimately becoming first captain of the Cadet Corps. More importantly, he absorbed lessons that would define his career: respect for structure, clarity of command, and accountability at every level. These values would later shape armies and nations. His early service in the Philippines exposed him to the realities of logistics, discipline, and command under pressure. Even then, fellow officers noted his calm authority and ability to motivate without intimidation. Learning the machinery of war. During World War I, Marshall did not command troops in dramatic charges. Instead, he mastered something far more consequential: operational planning. As chief of operations for frontline divisions, and later for the U.S. First Army, he learned how modern wars are won, not by heroics alone, but by coordination, timing, and supply. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive of 1918, one of the largest American operations of the war, tested every weakness in the Allied command structure. Marshall emerged from it with a deep understanding of what worked and what failed. Those lessons stayed with him. After the war, he served under General John J. Pershing, and later helped shape doctrine at the infantry school at Fort Benning. Many officers who passed through his instruction would later command Allied forces in World War II. Marshall wasn't just preparing for the next war, he was quietly training its leaders. World War II, organizing victory. On September 1st, 1939, the same day Germany invaded Poland, Marshall was sworn in as Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. At the time, America's military was shockingly small and underprepared. Fewer than 200,000 personnel stood between the nation and a rapidly expanding global conflict. What followed was one of the most ambitious mobilizations in human history. Under Marshall's direction, the U.S. military expanded to more than 8 million men and women in less than 4 years. New divisions were raised, trained, equipped, and deployed across multiple continents. Entire command structures were redesigned. Weapon systems were modernized. Logistics networks stretched across oceans. Marshall personally selected many of the commanders who would define the war, including Dwight D. Eisenhower. He valued competence over politics, results over reputation. Winston Churchill famously called him the organizer of victory, a title earned not on the battlefield, but through relentless preparation. Though Marshall strongly advocated for a cross-channel invasion of Europe, he never demanded personal command. When Eisenhower was chosen to lead D-Day, Marshall remained in Washington, ensuring that every unit, aircraft, and supply line functioned as planned. Without that foundation, Normandy would have failed. Diplomacy after destruction. When the war ended, Marshall stepped down from military leadership, but his most enduring work was only beginning. Europe was physically shattered and psychologically exhausted. Entire cities lay in rubble, industrial output had collapsed, food shortages were widespread, and political instability threatened to erase the hard-won Allied victory. There was a real fear that desperation would fuel extremism and plunge the continent into another cycle of conflict. In 1947, serving as U.S. Secretary of State, Marshall proposed a bold and unconventional solution. Instead of punishing defeated nations or exploiting their weakness, the United States would help rebuild Europe through large-scale economic recovery. This proposal became known as the Marshall Plan, formerly the European Recovery Program, and it marked a dramatic shift in how victors treated the aftermath of war. Over 4 years, the program directed billions of dollars into rebuilding infrastructure, stabilizing currencies, restoring industrial capacity, and reviving trade across Western Europe. The results were remarkable. Economies recovered faster than most experts predicted. Political extremism lost momentum, and former enemies began cooperating rather than competing for survival. Unlike many aid efforts before it, the Marshall Plan emphasized partnership. European nations developed their own recovery plans, while the United States provided funding, coordination, and oversight. The initiative strengthened transatlantic alliances, reduced the appeal of communism in fragile states, and helped establish a foundation for long-term peace and economic integration. A reluctant statesman, Marshall's public service did not end with diplomacy. In 1950, during the early stages of the Korean War, President Harry S. Truman called him back once more, this time as Secretary of Defense. Nearly 70 years old, Marshall accepted the role out of duty, focusing on restoring readiness, expanding troop strength, and improving morale within the armed forces during a tense and uncertain period. Even amid political controversy and fierce criticism, Marshall retained a reputation for honesty, restraint, and professionalism that crossed party lines. He avoided public grandstanding and rarely defended himself in the press, trusting that results would speak louder than rhetoric. In 1953, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace, not for negotiating an armistice or winning a war, but for helping prevent future ones through economic stability and international cooperation. Few military leaders have ever received the award, and fewer still embodied its spirit so fully. Marshall believed that power carried moral responsibility. He rejected personal ambition, avoided spectacle, and refused to turn his legacy into political capital. His authority came not from charisma or force of personality, but from trust earned over decades of service. Legacy beyond the battlefield. George C. Marshall's influence cannot be measured by medals, statues, or battlefield victories alone. His legacy lives on in institutions, alliances, and strategic principles that continue to shape the modern world. NATO, European integration, and the very idea of rebuilding former enemies as partners all trace their origins to the framework he helped establish. In an era increasingly defined by noise, ego, and spectacle, Marshall demonstrated that quiet competence could still move history. He understood that true victory does not end with surrender ceremonies or signed documents, but with stability, recovery, and lasting peace. While others sought recognition and headlines, Marshall focused on building systems that would endure long after he was gone. Because of that, his legacy remains not as a symbol of conquest or dominance, but as something far rarer, a reminder that leadership grounded in restraint, integrity, and foresight can change the course of the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and legacy of George C. Marshall, make sure to hit like so more people can discover stories that shape the modern world. For more powerful history told clearly, honestly, and without the noise, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next video.